Hey friends, this is Jamie Kemp, your missionary here in Indonesia. Thanks so much for your faithful prayers and generous giving. As you know, Indonesia is the largest Muslim country in the world, with over 220 million Muslims living right here. But we believe Indonesia will be the first Muslim-majority country to come to Christ. And one of the ways that's going to happen is by reaching the next generation. And with your help, we're making that happen. And here's what it looks like. Our English Center serves as our platform in Indonesia. Teaching English and holding English conversation groups helps us engage with Muslim young people who might never go into a church. Our weekly worship services have grown so much that we've needed to buy more chairs, and we're looking to start another service next semester. Each Friday night, over 100 Muslim young people gather to discuss God's Word. This building is filled with Muslim seekers trying to figure out who Jesus is and how he can change their lives. Every Thursday night, we pack this place for our weekly prayer meeting because we know without the power and presence of God, none of this is possible. But the thing that excites us most is that every week we train the next generation of pastors, missionaries, and leaders, because we know at the end of the day, it's gotta be Indonesians reaching Indonesians. The psalmist writes, "Even when I'm old and gray, let me declare your glory to the next generation." Well, I'm getting old and I'm getting gray, but because of your faithful prayers and generous giving, we're declaring God's glory to the next generation in Indonesia and throughout Asia Pacific. Thanks for believing in missions. Your right now resources are having a forever impact.
Well, good morning, Calvary Church. It's so great to be home with you guys today. I'm Jamie Kemp, your missionary to the country of Indonesia. My wife and I, we work with young people throughout Asia Pacific and are so grateful to be back here at Calvary Church this morning. This is our home church. We grew up in this church. I was saved at this church. I would sit over in this section over here. A lot of prayer time at this altar right over here. So this is really home for my wife and I served on pastoral staff here for 8 years as the junior high pastor. And so a lot of times people will ask me, is it difficult to live in Indonesia? Is it hard to work with Muslims? And I'm like, man, I did junior high ministry for 8 years, right? Everything's easy compared to that, right? So it is great to be back here at Calvary Church. So thanks, Pastor Marty, for the opportunity to share today. And it's just great to be here. My wife and I, we lead a team of about 20 people. Our missions team is about 20 people there in Indonesia. And I am by far the oldest person on our team in Indonesia. So our team is made up mostly of millennials, all right? But there's something happened this past year. We hired our first ever Gen Zer, all right? And so I feel like just about the time I was figuring out how to work with and lead millennials, now Gen Z comes along, all right? And so I'm having to relearn some new things, and to make things even more complicated, my daughter is considered Gen Z, all right? And so I'm trying to learn all these things so I can be a better communicator, a better leader. And so some of our young people, they were teaching me some of the new words, some of the new slang, some of the new language that Gen Z shares or they talk about. And so I thought I'd share a few words with you that I am learning from this younger generation. This is where my daughter rolls her eyes, all right? So most of us know about have heard words like ghosting, clapback, or woke, but here's a few words that I'm learning the definitions of from my Gen Z friends. How about this one? Cap and no cap. All right, anybody know what that means? All right, I don't know what it means. All right, but I've been told it means cap means to lie. No cap means it's the truth. All right, it's being truthful. No cap. All right, I can't work it into a sentence. I haven't been able to figure it out. All right, here's another word that I've been taught. Drip. All right, drip. You guys know that one? All right. I guess that's something when someone, all right, some of you guys are like, yeah. All right, you guys know what it is. All right. It's when you're looking good, when something looks cool or trendy, you know, man, that shirt is drip. I don't know, I can't say it. All right. Like I said, when I try to work it into my vocabulary, people just go like, no way, old man. All right. So, but this is my favorite one. This one I like. I like this one. I use this one all the time. Hits different. Oh, I like that one. Ooh, man, that sermon, that hits different. All right, so it's just like when something is unique or feels different or just kind of a different way of feeling, something better than usual, it hits different, all right? And then the last one is this that I'm trying to learn is vibing. Now, as a Gen Xer, we would have called this chillaxing, all right? It's chilling out, relaxing. So young people might say, oh, I was just vibing, all right? I was checking out. I was just chilling, just enjoying the atmosphere of where we're at. So here's what I'm learning. The older I get, the more I notice the differences between me and the younger generations, right? Maybe I could say it this way. I notice the generational gaps are getting bigger, all right? The generational gaps are getting bigger. Things like clothing, tattoos, piercings, hairstyles, music, movies, even language. These generational gaps are getting bigger the older I get. So here's what I want us to talk about today. As a church, how do we bridge these generational gaps? How do we bridge these generational gaps from young to old? As a church, we need to bridge these generational gaps. This is one of the things that makes the church so different and so unique from any other organization in the world, is that we are not only multi-ethnic, but we are multi-generational. All right? And that's important for us to understand that the church is so different than any other organization, any nonprofit, any company. What makes us so unique and so different than anything else is that we're not only multi-ethnic, but we're multi-generational. And when we lose that vision, when we cease to be a church that ministers to the old, cares for families, and reaches the next generation, the church will begin to lose its influence, shrink, and close. So do we have faith, Calvary Church, to bridge the generational gaps? Do we have faith to bridge these generational gaps? This is what we're after here at Calvary Church. This is what your pastor, Pastor Marty, wants to see. And I love these new initiatives that Pastor Marty and the leadership of Calvary Church is working on. It's the expansion of the school. It's the establishment of a college extension program here. It's ministering to kids with special needs. In many ways, these things don't benefit me directly at all or in any way. Yet I can believe in them and support them because I love the church. And the church has a calling to bridge these generational gaps. There's a vision to reach the next generation. So in Acts chapter 2, you can open your Bibles there if you want. Oh, the sound of pages, right? That's a unique sound here in the church, all right? The sound of pages. I was thinking about that, like, heard Pastor Sean say, if you have a Bible, but you forgot it, you can go get one, but make sure you bring it back. And I was thinking, can you steal a Bible? Like, is that possible? Like, I don't know. Like, you get that part in the Bible where it says, thou shalt not steal. You're like, oh, I got to return it. All right, so Acts chapter 2, I just want to read a couple verses because on the day of Pentecost in Acts chapter 2, we see the apostle Peter, he prophesies something to us about what a spirit-filled, a spirit-empowered church looks like in verses 17 and 18. And that's what I want us to get at. I think that's what we want to be about as a church. So in Acts chapter 2, verse 17 and 18, it says this. In the last days, God says, I will pour out my spirit on all people. Your sons and daughters will prophesy. Your young men will see visions. Your old men will dream dreams. In those days, I will pour out my spirit even on my servants, men and women alike, and they will prophesy. I want us to look at those words, these two different people that are mentioned here. Young people will see visions. the old people will dream dreams. So we see here a spirit-empowered church. What we're after here is to be a church filled with young people who are visionaries and old people who dream dreams. So we have visionaries and dreamers. And one of the signs of a healthy church is dreamers and visionaries, young and old, working together, serving together, worshiping together. God wants the young and old in his church. And the danger I see today is that we can become a church that is so polarized by age. So we see churches full of young people, and there's some danger in that. Or we'll also see the danger in a church filled with just old people. And so we need God not to raise up a church that we want, but a church that he wants. We need God to raise up a church not that we want, but a church that he wants. A spirit-empowered church that has dreamers and visionaries working and worshiping together. So let me ask this question. Who here is old? All right, now some of you guys might think, like, what's the criteria for that? This is how I judge if you're getting old. When you get out of bed, does something hurt? All right, like I feel like that is like probably the best, because I look at my son, and he just springs out of bed. I'm like, oh man, it takes me a little while to get there, all right? So I feel like, because people ask, what's the criteria? I'm like, I feel like that's where I'm at, all right? I feel like once things start hurting in the morning, you're kind of getting up there. All right, well, how many young people do we have here? All right, we got some. So be like, what does it mean to be young? I'm not quite sure what that means. I got people in their 60s and 70s like, it's me. All right, I'm still there. So the other day, I'm in the car with my daughter, and we're in a rental car, and I'm kind of doing the seek button on the radio to kind of find some tunes to listen to as we're driving, and I'm hitting the seek button, and it stops at a radio station, and it's playing Pearl Jam, all right? And I'm like, all right, like this is the music of my youth, and I tell my daughter, back when I was at Wabansie Valley in the late 1900s, this was my jam, right? This was my music, all right? And so she's kind of rolling her eyes, but it was a rental car to where if you've seen it on like the radio, sometimes it'll say like it'll have a display. It'll say like the name of the radio station, the title of the song, and then like the artist. And then sometimes it'll even say like the genre of the music or the genre of the radio station, right? So sometimes you'll see like country or talk or Christian. But on this one, as I was just explaining to my daughter how cool I was back in high school, she looks at it and it says the radio station, and then it says oldies. I'm like, what? When did my music become oldies? Like that my parents listen to oldies, right? I don't listen to oldies, all right? But that's what I kind of learned that day, all right? But here's what we want to do. We need to bring these two groups together. Dreamers and visionaries, the old and young worshiping together. This is not only important for the church, it's supernatural. Because each of these ages, each of these groupings, and sometimes we flow back and forth between being young and old, depending on who we're with, but each of these generations, all of our generations, have unique giftings that they bring to the church. But there's also different challenges that they have in different generations. That's why this is so important. But here's what the enemy wants to do. He wants to separate these two groups. He wants to divide visionaries and dreamers. To have dreamers holding on to the past while visionaries are just telling them to let it go. And if you take dreamers, the old, without the young, you get a bunch of people who want to protect the past and become irrelevant for the future. And the church grows old and closes. But if all you have is young people, if all you have is visionaries in the church, then you got a lot of excitement and creativity, but without any roots or stability. And the church has no wisdom and can make mistakes. But a spirit-empowered church, what we're after here, what you're a part of, has both these dreamers and visionaries working and worshiping together. So how do we do this? How do we bridge these generational gaps as a church? If you're taking notes, you can write down these 4 words. These 4 words: wisdom and testimony, purpose and patience. Wisdom and testimony, purpose and patience. I want to talk to the dreamers first, a.k.a. the old people, all right? Some of you guys are saying, Jamie, you're not old. I'm going to say thank you. All right, so the church needs your wisdom and testimony. We need it. I need it. Job 12:12 puts it this way. Is not wisdom found among the aged? Does not long life bring understanding? I love the way Proverbs 16:31 puts it. It says this, gray hair is a crown of glory. It is gained by living a godly life, all right? So those of you coloring your hair, all right? Man, you're covering up your crown of glory, all right? I'm guilty of that myself, all right? But I love that, man. Gray hair, man, it's a crown of glory. There's wisdom in that gray hair. I guess that's what the Bible is telling us, all right? I was thinking about this all week because the two most influential people in my life are these two guys who are in their 60s. Now, why is that? Is it because no one my age likes me or wants to talk with me? No, I hope not. It's because I need their wisdom. I need their advice on how to be a better dad, on how to be a better pastor, on how to be a better man of God. I don't want to ask my friends those things. What do they know, right? I need the wisdom of the aged. I need the wisdom of dreamers. When I was in my early 20s here at Calvary Church, I was newly married and learning how to be a good husband. And I saw Rick and Ann's marriage. And I thought, man, that was something that I admired. So probably in the most awkward way, I remember approaching Rick and saying, hey, can I take you to lunch and just talk to you about how to be a good dad and a good father? And here's the funny thing. When I was in my 20s, man, I thought Rick was so old and so wise, right? And now I think about him like he was my age. He had plenty of life in him. All right, so I remember Fred Martin, and he showed me that I can be a manly man, whatever that means. That I can learn how to go on missions trips, lay brick, build building, do construction, but still have a sensitivity for the things of God. That I can have calloused hands from working hard, but a soft heart for the things of God. Even this morning, I was texting my mentor, Pastor Dave, in Indonesia, and he's in his late 60s getting ready to retire. But man, I need the wisdom and the counsel of those who are older than me. I'm grateful for these older men, these dreamers that God has put into my life. And it doesn't matter how old you get, we need the wisdom of dreamers. We need the wisdom of others. And here's why. Because every dreamer in the church has a testimony. They know the way of the Lord. That crown of glory, that gray hair, it speaks to the faithfulness of the Lord. They've already experienced His goodness even in the difficult times. Revelation 12:11 says this, and they defeated Him by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. So when I have a problem, man, I don't go running to my friends. I don't go to my small group. I need a dreamer. I need somebody a little older, somebody with a little more experience who knows the goodness of God, who knows the faithfulness of God. My mother, she told me this story when I was a teenager, that when she was a brand new Christian, she had 3 small children, and my dad, he traveled, he was on a business trip, and it was one of those times where he left and on a trip, and there wasn't enough money to buy groceries that week. And this is, before the time of cell phones and ATM and debit cards. And so she'd been told by her pastor as a young Christian that God answers prayer. So she prays, God, I don't have enough money for this week. I don't know how we're going to buy groceries as a family. I can't get in touch with my husband. How are we going to do this? She said shortly after praying that, I was just 3 years old at the time. I come walking down the stairs, and I'm holding a paper book in my hand. And she says, Jamie, what do you got there? And so, doing a little 3-year-old, I walk over, I hand it to her, and it was an old school bank book. All right, if you remember that, you'd have your bank books. And she opens up, it was a bank account that she'd forgotten about that had $50 in it. And she was able to go to the grocery store and get groceries for that week. And she told me that story when I was a teenager. And she was able to testify to me as a young person that, man, God is a provider, that God provides that God answers prayer. And that's what this generation needs to hear. They need to hear our testimonies and the stories of God's goodness, that God can come through for us. This generation needs to hear testimonies like that. I need to hear testimonies like that. So who in your life is speaking this kind of faith into you? James 1:2-4 says it this way. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kind, because you know the testing, everybody say testing. Because you know, I love the way the scriptures say, because you know the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. Here's how I've heard it said. You can't spell testimony without a test, all right? You can't have a testimony without a test. How many of you have been through some tests? How many of you know? And that's what it says, that the testing of your faith brings this maturity, that God is at work in you. And this generation, this church, we need to hear each other's testimonies. We need to hear of the faithfulness of God so that when I'm struggling, man, and I don't have the faith to keep going, I can borrow some from you. That I can say, you can say, you know what? I've been through something like that, and you can lend me some of your faith so that I can keep going, that I can keep persevering, so that my faith can become mature and I can lend it out to others as well. And that's what we want to be after as a church. Grandmas and grandpas in the room, the Lord still has plans for you. You might feel old and tired, but man, the Lord's not, man, this church needs you. We need you, moms and dads here. Man, God has purposes and plans for you here at this church in the kingdom of God. God is not done with you. So you might feel like, man, my time is done. I'm going to let the young people just kind of to lead. No, God still has plans for you. He's not done with you yet. Someone should write a worship song about that, right? But man, there is still purpose and plan. I need to hear that. This next generation, the young people, need to hear your testimony and the faithfulness and the goodness of God. Okay, enough about the old. Let's talk about the young. All right. Our church needs wisdom and testimony, but a spirit-empowered church needs purpose and patience. Needs the purpose and the patience of young people. Let me explain. I remember when my kids were young, when Phoebe was just little, we moved to Indonesia when she was just 3 months old. So both my kids have been raised in Indonesia. And I remember playing hide and seek with my kids when Phoebe was little. She would, I'd say, okay, you count to 10, and I'm gonna go and hide, okay? And so she'd be in her little bedroom, and she'd cover her eyes, and she'd count in Indonesian, satu, dua, tiga. She'd start counting, and I'd run over here, and I'd go and I'd hide behind something, and I'd be waiting for her to find me. I'd be standing over here waiting and waiting. My hiding spot was not all that good, all right? It was like behind a door. So I'm like, what's going on? So I remember making a little bit of noise, to kind of help her to find me. And I'm waiting, and she just never comes to find me. So finally, I leave my hiding spot, and I go back into her room, and I notice she's sitting on the floor playing with a bunch of toys, all right? So I was like, you're kind of defeating the purpose of the game here, all right? Like if I'm hiding and nobody's seeking, I'm just being weird, right? That's just strange, all right? And so I remember being like the purpose of hide and seek is one person hides and the other person has to seek. That's the whole purpose of the game. If you don't come and find me, then I'm just kind of hanging out behind the door, all right? And so I'm worried that we've got a generation of young people growing up in the church that doesn't know they have purpose in the church. That we've got a generation, when I look at a lot of young people in the church, they look bored. That they've grown up in the church, they've grown up in the faith, but they've never grasped a hold of their spiritual purposes. They come to church, come to youth group. For the most part, when I look at the young people here today, man, you're good and you're moral people. But have you ever been empowered to go and make disciples? A lot of young people, they have a faith based in church rather than in Jesus. A lot of young people, they have a faith based in church rather than Jesus. So no wonder they get disillusioned and disappointed when a church leader lets them down or the church lets them down, because their faith was based in the church rather than putting it in Jesus. So maybe the young people, you need to realize that you've got purpose for your life now. The Lord has use for you now. You don't have to wait till you're old. I love how 1 Timothy 4:12 puts it. It says, to this, you young people, it says, don't let anyone look down on you because you are young, but instead set an example for all the believers in speech, life, love, faith, and purity. So what are you to be about, young people, today? Set an example for us in your speech, in your life, your love, your faith, and your purity. That's your calling. You don't have to wait till you graduate high school. You don't have to wait till you get a career and married. Man, be the example for us now, young people. You've got purpose now. Us old people, we're waiting for you to step into these positions of leadership, to be an influence and impact our faith. When I see young people lifting their hands and jumping up and down, man, us old people, we love that. We want to jump with you. The problem is after the second jump, I'm like, you jump, all right? I'm jumping on the inside, right? So young people, man, we need that energy. We need you to have that passion here at the church, because some of us, man, we're just tired. Right? But man, you guys, we need you. So all you young millennials, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, man, we need you. You young adults, man, there is purpose. You are not the church of tomorrow. You're the church of today. You have purpose. You have meaning now in this church. Go and make disciples. Put your faith in Jesus. Reach out to those around you. Get a vision for how God wants to use you now, not to wait until you're older. God has purpose for you, because here's what happens when young people get a vision from God. Here's what happens when visionaries say yes to the purposes of God. They start reaching new people. And here's why we need patience. Here's why we need patience. Because if we really want to become a Spirit-empowered church, there will be new people coming to this church. People who don't look like you. People who don't act like you. People from different backgrounds. People still stuck in habits of sin. People who are confused about their identity. Young people who don't dress the same way for church that I dress for church. Someone who has been out all Saturday night yet comes and sits down in church on Sunday morning. People who are hurting and broken, and now they're sitting next to you in church. There's going to be, man, when we become a Spirit-empowered church, there's going to be new people coming to this church, and they might even sit in your seat, all right? And how are we going to respond? And that's why we need to have the patience of God. This is actually how the Scriptures tells us. The Bible tells us this in Romans 15:1. We who are strong ought to bear with the failings of the weak and not please ourselves. So it falls on us to show patience and show grace to the new people that are coming into our church, who are still stuck in habits of sin, who are still trying to figure out who they are and their place in the kingdom of God, that we show them great patience as they start coming in with looking different and worshiping different and feeling and acting different than how we might feel comfortable. Patience. We're patient with them. A Spirit-filled church must have the wisdom and testimony of the dreamers, but the purpose and the patience of young people. Like so many young people in my church in Indonesia, Mealy showed up at one of our retreats. Mealy was invited by one of our Christian young people to one of our retreats, and Mealy came in with a terrible reputation. She was already famous for the drugs she did and the lifestyle that she lived, because Mealy had grown up with a horrible background. just abused both physically and sexually. And so as a teenager, she tried everything she could to kind of to heal her life, to kind of to fix that pain in her life. So when she finally met a Christian and a Christian invited her to church, she thought, well, let me give God a try. All right, I've tried everything else and nothing else has worked. So let me give God a try. And she shows up at our church broken and hurting and dressed totally inappropriately. She shows up there, and at our church, at that retreat, man, she received the healing and deliverance that she needed. But that's not even the end of her story. Because when Mealy came back from that retreat, she starts attending church. She gets involved in a small group, and as she gets involved in that small group, she starts inviting her friends. And you know what kind of friends Mealy had? She had friends who were broken and hurting. And so all of a sudden, her small group is filled with people with difficult backgrounds and lots of problems. And I remember my wife and I quickly saw that Mealy, man, that she had the call of God on her life, that there was something special about her, and she became a small group leader, and she starts becoming a leader in our church and ministering to others. And I remember thinking, man, she's got a degree in communications, but man, we think she might be called into ministry, but we didn't want to take her away from her degree. But a couple weeks later, Mealy comes up to my wife and I and says, Pastor Jamie, I've been praying and I think I want to go into full-time ministry. How can I do that? And I was like, I know how. All right. So after she graduated university, we brought her onto our ministry team, our ministry staff. And it was just incredible for the next couple years to watch Mealy grow into this powerful woman of God. And she learned how to preach and how to lead small groups and grow and develop as a leader. It's just incredible to watch. But her story still doesn't end there, because 2 years ago, she comes to me and she says, Pastor Jamie, I feel like God's calling me to go and plant a church. Can I go do that? And I'm like, this is incredible. It was like 6 years ago you were doing drugs, and now you want to go plant a church. And so 2 years ago it was just incredible because we were able to send her out and sponsor her and support her to go plant a church. And today, literally today in Indonesia, she stood in front of her church and preached a sermon. And guess what kind of people are attending her church? The broken and the hurt. So Pastor Mealy, not Mealy anymore, Pastor Mealy stands up in front of her church filled with the broken and the hurting, and they're finding the hope that we know is in Jesus. And this is what I've learned, that the Lord has a way of taking what's broken and making it beautiful. The Lord has this incredible way of taking what's broken and making it beautiful. And that's what we're after here today. As you might have come in here broken and hurting. You might have been invited by a friend. Maybe you've been coming every week and you're not sure, God, what are you up to? I'm going through these difficult circumstances. Man, that's why we're sharing testimony today of God's goodness. So you might feel like, man, Pastor Jamie, I don't have the faith to believe that God's going to provide. I don't have the faith to believe that my son or my daughter is going to come to faith. What I want to say is, if you don't have the faith, that's all right. Borrow some of mine today. Borrow those who are stronger. Man, what we say is, you're sitting next to somebody who say, man, I need their faith. While I'm worshiping, you might think, I can't worship today. That's why we worship together, because you might not be able to lift your hands. So I want to say to you, man, borrow some of mine. Those of you who are stronger, man, we lend it out to the young so that they can get stronger, so they can hear the wisdom and the testimony of those who are a little further along. And young people, you run with that passion. You run with purpose, and you set new trends. You reach people that we could have never reached. And we watch this church become exactly what God has called us to be. Not just multi-ethnic, but multi-generational. This is what we're after. A spirit-filled church. A church where we see young and old worshiping and working together.